Welcome back, my invisible dismantler. The exposure happened last month, but the cult you exposed still doesn't know they're finished. You didn't confront them with evidence, didn't stage dramatic interventions, didn't force anyone to acknowledge the manipulation you uncovered. Instead, you did something far more surgical and far more devastating. You exposed their entire operation so smoothly, so subtly, so perfectly that they watched their power structure collapse in real time while believing they were still in control. They got played without ever sensing the game, dismantled without recognizing dismantlement, cooked so thoroughly they're still performing their rituals, still maintaining their hierarchy, still convinced they're the powerful collective they've always been, completely blind to the fact that you've already neutralized every foundation their influence rested on. The architects have been monitoring collective psychology manipulation across civilizations, and they've identified what you executed as imperceptible dissolution strategy, when an operator dismantles group power structures so skillfully that the group continues performing its patterns while the actual power those patterns generated has been completely drained. Most people who expose cults do it through confrontation, presenting evidence that forces acknowledgement, creating dramatic reveals that make denial impossible, attacking overtly in ways that leave no question about what occurred. This satisfies the exposer's ego, but often backfires by strengthening the cult through persecution, narrative, through martyr identity, through members bonding tighter against external threats. You avoided every single failure mode by making the exposure imperceptible to those being exposed. You didn't attack their structure, you rearranged reality around them so subtly that they continue old behaviors, while those behaviors no longer produce the effects they once did. Watch what's happening inside their organization right now. Leadership still holds meetings where they issue commands, still maintains hierarchy where authority flows downward, still performs theatrical displays that used to maintain member compliance. But the commands aren't being followed anymore. Members not in agreement, then do whatever. They were planning anyway, treating directives as suggestions rather than obligations. The hierarchy exists structurally, but not functionally. Formal chains of command remain while actual influence flows through informal networks that bypass official channels completely. The theatrical displays still occur, but they're increasingly hollow. Fewer members attend. Those present are mentally checked out. Performances that used to generate reverence now generate awkward silence. You didn't destroy their structures. You drained those structures of power while leaving the empty forms standing. Some members sense something feels wrong, but can't identify what changed. They attend meetings that follow familiar scripts, yet somehow feel meaningless. They receive directives that sound identical to past orders, yet somehow lack weight. They watch leadership perform rituals that look exactly like previous ceremonies, yet somehow seem fake. This vague feeling that something's off creates confusion, thus structures appear unchanged. So why do they feel ineffective? Most members resolve this by assuming they're personally changing, going through a phase, having their commitment waver. They don't realize the structures themselves were neutralized because the neutralization was so smooth they can't pinpoint when or how it occurred. They're questioning themselves rather than questioning what you did to their system. The truly elegant element is that you achieved this without becoming their enemy. They don't view you as threat because you never attacked directly. They don't hate you because you never gave them a target for hatred. They don't fear you because they don't recognize you as the source of their dissolution. If they understood what you did, they could potentially reorganize around opposing you, could attempt rebuilding what you dismantled, could at least learn from the experience. But they don't understand, which means they can't adapt, can't defend, can't prevent you from doing this again to whatever they might try to rebuild. You've achieved a victory that generates no counter force because the Defeated party doesn't recognize defeat. The cult got played so smoothly they're still acting out their power fantasies, completely unaware that the power behind those fantasies evaporated weeks ago. Now the architects are analyzing the specific mechanisms you deployed to achieve imperceptible dissolution, and they're identifying what they call cognitive seed. Architecture, you didn't attack the cult's beliefs directly, but instead introduced subtle questions and alternative perspectives that grew organically within members' minds until they arrived at critical conclusions independently. This is exponentially more powerful than convincing through argument because people resist external persuasion but embrace insights they believe they discovered themselves. You planted seeds of doubt, of critical thinking, of manipulation recognition, but because members experienced these realizations as their own thoughts rather than your influence, they had no psychological defenses activated against them. Watch how your seed planting operated. In casual conversations with cult members, you never challenged their beliefs directly. Instead, you asked innocent-sounding questions that contained subtle logical inconsistencies with cult doctrine. That's interesting. How does that work when followed by scenario that exposed contradiction? The member would initially deflect, but the question lingered. Days later, they'd encounter situations where that exact contradiction became apparent. Because you planted the question before the contradiction manifested, they experienced discovering the inconsistency rather than being told about it. This discovery felt like their own critical thinking rather than your manipulation, which meant their ego was invested in the insight rather than defending against it. Some members started noticing patterns after you pointed out isolated incidents. You'd mention something seemingly trivial. Interesting how leadership always announces major decisions right after members raise concerns about something else. Then let them observe whether the pattern continued. When it did continue, they felt like investigative geniuses uncovering manipulation rather than victims being shown manipulation. This reframing is psychologically critical. Victims feel powerless and often double down on denial to avoid that feeling. Investigators feel empowered and continue investigating to maintain that feeling. You transformed potential victims into investigators of their own situation by structuring revelations as discoveries rather than exposures. Others began questioning the group after you validated perspectives they'd been suppressing. Cult members often have doubts they've learned to silence through self-criticism. I'm being selfish. I'm not committed enough. I'm letting ego interfere. You didn't tell them their doubts were valid. You shared your own parallel doubts in unrelated contexts, modeling that questioning isn't character flaw, but healthy cognition. You know, I used to think questioning things meant I wasn't loyal, but I realized loyalty without questioning is just obedience. Members hearing this felt permission to acknowledge their own suppressed doubts without the shame cult conditioning had attached to doubt. Once they stopped suppressing questions, those questions multiplied naturally. A few members started recognizing manipulation techniques after you described those techniques in completely different contexts, discussing historical cults, political movements, abusive relationships. You never said, your group does this. But when members heard detailed descriptions of isolation tactics, love bombing, thought-stopping cliches, and emotional manipulation, they couldn't help recognizing identical patterns in their own experience. Because you framed it as general education rather than specific accusation, they absorbed the information without activating defensive reactions. Then they started seeing the techniques everywhere in their group, experiencing growing horror as they recognized they'd been subjects of textbook manipulation. The architects observed that cognitive seed architecture succeeds where direct confrontation fails because it leverages the target's own cognitive processes rather than fighting against them. When you tell someone they're being manipulated, you trigger defensive responses, denial, rationalization, doubling down on commitment to prove you wrong. When you plant seeds that grow into the person telling themselves they're being manipulated, you've recruited their own intelligence as ally rather than opponent. The cult got played because you made their members play themselves, made them dismantle their own beliefs using critical thinking they believed they were deploying independently. You were never the attacker in their perception, which is precisely what made the attack so devastatingly effective. Something extraordinary is spreading through the former membership now, what the architects call Cascade, disillusionment, where your seed planting with a few members created chain reactions that spread critical awareness throughout the entire network. Once several members independently began questioning, their doubts validated each other's doubts, creating permission structure for broader questioning that the cult's social pressure had previously suppressed. You didn't need to reach every member individually. You reached key nodes in the social network, who then inadvertently became your agents by sharing their growing doubts with trusted connections. Watch how the Cascade operated. Members who'd been questioning in isolation discovered, through careful probing, that others harbored similar doubts. These discoveries were revelatory. Each person had believed they were alone in questioning, that their doubts indicated personal failure rather than legitimate concerns. Finding even one other person questioning transformed the experience from "I'm broken and disloyal" to "wait, maybe the group has actual problems." These pairs and small groups of questioners then became support networks for deeper investigation. They'd compare notes about concerning incidents, validate each other's observations that contradicted official narratives, collectively research information the cult leadership had discouraged them from examining. Some of those questioning clusters included influential members, people who weren't formal leaders but had social credibility within the network. When these respected figures began expressing doubts, it created permission for others to doubt who'd been suppressing questions due to social pressure. The cult had maintained conformity, partly through making dissent seem rare and shameful. Your seed planting broke this illusion by helping members discover dissent was actually common but hidden. Once hidden dissent became visible within trusted relationships, the social pressure flipped. Suddenly conformity seemed naive rather than loyal. Questioning seemed intelligent rather than disloyal. Others discovered that leadership had been lying about specific verifiable facts, financial information, member retention numbers, external criticism. Your questions had prompted some members to independently verify claims leadership made. When they discovered discrepancies between official narratives and documented reality, it shattered trust completely. These members shared their discoveries with others, who then verified other claims and found more lies. What started as discovering leadership, exaggerated minor details escalated into recognizing leadership systematically, manipulated information to maintain control. Members felt betrayed not just by being lied to, but by realizing they'd been participating in spreading lies to newer members without knowing those claims were false. A few members began secretly communicating with people who'd left the cult. Connections leadership had forbidden to maintain spiritual purity. Your seed planting had included mentioning that controlling outside relationships is classic manipulation tactic. When members realized they'd been isolated from external perspectives, some tentatively reached out to former members they'd been taught to view as corrupted or failures. These conversations were explosive. Former members confirmed that doubts current members were experiencing were identical to doubts they'd had, that patterns current members were noticing were patterns they'd noticed, that leaving had been healthiest decision of their lives. Hearing from people who'd successfully exited transformed departure from unthinkable to possible. The architects observed that Cascade Disillusionment creates exponential impact from minimal initial intervention. You planted seeds with perhaps a dozen strategic individuals. Those seeds grew into doubts. Doubts shared became validated concerns. Validated concerns grew into investigations. Investigations uncovered lies. Lies destroyed trust. Destroyed trust led to exodus. Each phase multiplied impact of previous phase. You set off chain reaction that continued, propagating without requiring further intervention. The cult got played because they built their power on social pressure and information control. Once you compromised those foundations with key members, the structure collapsed from its own internal contradictions rather than requiring you to push it. Now the architects are revealing what made your approach uniquely devastating. You didn't just expose the cult's manipulation of members. You exposed manipulation to members in ways that simultaneously taught them how manipulation works. They're not just leaving the cult, they're leaving immune to similar manipulation in the future because they now recognize the techniques. This is what the architects call inoculation through exposure, and it transforms your intervention from tactical success into strategic victory that prevents the cult from simply reforming under new leadership with the same vulnerable population. Consider what typical cult exposure achieves. Someone reveals that leadership lied, that finances were misused, that specific abuses occurred. Members who believe the exposure leave, but they often remain psychologically vulnerable to similar manipulation because they understand they were deceived. Without understanding how deception operated, they can identify that particular cult as corrupt without being able to identify manipulation techniques generally. This leaves them susceptible to different cults using similar methods. They learned don't trust those specific people, but not don't trust these specific techniques. Your exposure was educational. You didn't just show them this group was manipulative. You taught them what manipulation looks like in principle. Watch what your now former members understand. They can identify love, bombing, the intense affection and attention new members receive that creates emotional dependency and obligation. They recognize how it feels, understand its purpose, see through it when encountering it elsewhere. They can identify thought-stopping cliches, the rehearsed phrases cultists use to shut down critical thinking. They recognize these as manipulation techniques rather than wisdom, can feel when someone's trying to stop them from thinking rather than helping them think clearly. They can identify isolation tactics, the ways groups separate members from outside perspectives and relationships. They recognize this as control mechanism rather than spiritual purity or loyalty test. Some members now understand information control, how leadership manipulated what information they accessed, how outside sources were discredited preemptively, how questioning was framed as character weakness rather than intelligence. They recognize this pattern and are now skeptical when any group or leader tries to position themselves as only reliable information source. Others understand exploitation of commitment, how the cult extracted increasing investments of time, money, and identity in ways that made living feel like losing everything they'd invested. They now recognize sunk cost fallacy, manipulation, and understand that past investment isn't valid reason to continue bad investment. A few understand the complete manipulation architecture, how various techniques work together to create system that was extraordinarily difficult to exit. Despite being obviously dysfunctional to outside observers, they see how isolation prevented reality checks, how commitment escalation created exit costs, how thought-stopping prevented critical analysis, how love bombing created emotional dependency, how information control prevented comparison with alternatives. Understanding the system makes them highly resistant to similar systems because they recognize components even when arrangement differs. The architects observe that inoculation, through exposure, creates permanent damage to cult's recruitment base. Former members aren't just lost members, they're now counter-recruitment agents who can identify and warn potential recruits about manipulation techniques. They're spreading understanding of how manipulation works to friends and family, reducing the population of people vulnerable to these methods. The cult leadership doesn't realize this yet, but they're not just dealing with temporary membership decline, they're dealing with permanent degradation of their ability to recruit and retain because their methods have been exposed not just as bad, but as recognizable manipulation techniques that educated people can identify and resist. You didn't just play them, you taught their victims how they got played, ensuring they can't play them the same way twice. The architects are now analyzing why the cult leadership remains oblivious to what happened, and they're identifying something remarkable. Your attack exploited the leader's own narcissism and confirmation bias to make the dissolution invisible to them. They call this ego-leveraged blindness, and it describes how you used the leadership's psychological weaknesses to prevent them from recognizing their organization was collapsing. The same traits that made them effective cult leaders: grandiosity, certainty, intolerance for criticism, are now preventing them from perceiving they've been defeated. Watch how leadership interprets declining attendance. Members are showing up less frequently to meetings, participating less actively when present, finding excuses to avoid cult activities they previously prioritized. Normal analysis would recognize this as disengagement, early signs of exodus. But cult leadership has invested identity in belief that their teaching is so compelling,
their leadership so inspiring,
their community so valuable that members would never authentically want to leave. This creates cognitive dissonance when faced with disengagement. Their self-concept says members are devoted. Their observation shows declining devotion. They resolve this dissonance, not by updating self-concept, but by reinterpreting observation. Some leaders are explaining departure as spiritual testing. These members are going through trials that will ultimately strengthen their commitment. They're being tested by the universe or God. Their apparent distance is actually progress toward deeper devotion. This interpretation allows leaders to maintain grandiose self-concept while accommodating members who are literally walking away. Others are blaming external corruption. Departed members were poisoned by outside influences, got seduced by materialism, fell prey to negative energy. This interpretation preserves leaders' belief in their own perfection while explaining departures as external contamination rather than internal failure. A few leaders are viewing exodus as purification, claiming that departed members were never truly committed, that their leaving reveals they were always unworthy, that the group is stronger without these weak links. This is perhaps most psychologically protective interpretation because it transforms embarrassing failure, members leaving, into desired outcome, purifying the community. Leaders convince themselves they wanted these departures, that losing half their membership is actually victory because remaining members are truly devoted. This reframe prevents them from recognizing organizational collapse because collapse is reinterpreted as refinement. Leadership is also buffered from reality by yes men and echo chambers. The members who remain longest are typically true believers or those with most to lose by acknowledging they've been manipulated. These people continue affirming leadership's greatness, continue participating in rituals, continue performing devotion, even as the organization hollows out. Leadership sees these continued believers and interprets their devotion as evidence that nothing's fundamentally wrong, that departures are individual failures rather than systemic collapse. They're experiencing availability bias. The devoted members they interact with are highly visible, departed members become invisible, so their sample of member sentiment is completely unrepresentative. The architects observe that ego-leveraged blindness creates perfect conditions for imperceptible dissolution. If leadership recognized they were being attacked, they could adapt, could counterattack, could attempt recovery, but recognition would require admitting they've failed, that their leadership was inadequate, that their teaching was flawed, that their organization was vulnerable. These admissions are psychologically incompatible with narcissistic personality structures, so instead they don't recognize, don't adapt, don't counter. They continue performing leadership of organization that no longer exists in meaningful form, like generals issuing orders to army that's already deserted, like captains commanding ship that's already sunk. You played them by ensuring that recognizing they'd been played would require psychological honesty they're constitutionally incapable of. The cult got cooked because their leaders' egos prevented them from smelling the smoke. Now something's emerging that the architects call strategic ambiguity maintenance. You're deliberately avoiding any clear declaration of victory or explicit acknowledgement of what you did, keeping the cult leadership and remaining members uncertain about whether dissolution was even intentional or just unfortunate circumstance. This ambiguity serves multiple strategic purposes, all working to ensure they can't effectively respond to or recover from your intervention. By leaving them uncertain about whether they were attacked or just experienced natural decline, you prevent them from organizing around opposition to you while ensuring they can't learn from analyzing your methods. Watch what strategic ambiguity is accomplishing. Cult leadership can't decide whether you're enemy or neutral party. You never declared opposition, never claimed credit for departures, never framed yourself as their adversary. Some leaders think you're irrelevant to what happened. That membership decline has nothing to do with you. Others suspect you influence things but can't articulate how or prove it, creating frustrating certainty that you're involved without clear understanding of your methods. This uncertainty prevents unified response. Some leaders want to counterattack you. Others think doing so would be paranoid and counterproductive because maybe you weren't involved. They're fractured in their assessment of what happened and therefore can't mount coherent response. Some remaining members are defending you when leadership mentions you suspiciously, because you never attacked the cult overtly, because you maintained friendly relationships with members, even while planting seeds of doubt, because your intervention was subtle rather than aggressive. Many members genuinely believe you weren't trying to hurt the group when leadership suggests you're responsible for departures. These members argue you were just asking questions, just being friendly, just engaging in normal conversation. Your strategic ambiguity recruited the cult's own members as defenders of your benign intentions, even as those intentions destroyed their organization. Others outside the cult are confused about what occurred. The cult can't explain their collapse in ways that make them look competent. They can't say someone subtly exposed our manipulation and our members recognized they were being controlled because that admission reveals they were manipulative and controlling. They can't say someone planted seeds of doubt through sophisticated psychological intervention because they can't prove it, and claiming it makes them sound paranoid. They're left with weak explanations like, some members lost their way, or we're going through transition period that don't satisfy anyone and make them appear weak rather than attacked. Your strategic ambiguity denied them compelling narrative for what happened, preventing them from generating sympathy or support. A few observers who understand what you did are impressed by the strategic ambiguity. They recognize you could claim credit, could publicly celebrate your victory, could explicitly take responsibility for cult's dissolution, but they understand that doing so would accomplish nothing positive while creating several negatives. It would make you target for cults remaining true believers, would establish precedent that makes your methods less effective against future groups, would transform you from neutral observer to declared enemy in ways that might complicate future interventions. By maintaining ambiguity, you preserve ability to operate similarly against other problematic groups without them having clear playbook for your approach. The architects observe that strategic ambiguity maintenance is sign of sophisticated operator. Amateurs need credit for their victories, need recognition, need to declare their role explicitly. Professionals understand that invisible victories are often more valuable than celebrated ones, that ambiguity can be more powerful than clarity, that letting enemies remain confused about what happened prevents them from learning and adapting. The cult got played so smoothly that you can walk away without anyone being certain you were playing them at all, leaving them unable to hate you effectively, unable to learn from defeat they can't clearly define, unable to recover from dissolution they can't definitively explain. Your victory is complete precisely because it remains ambiguous. Whether victory was achieved or misfortune simply occurred naturally.